I'm currently recording this from a parked car outside a police station because I can't go back to the house I've lived in for 20 years. My parents always told me that the heavy steel door in the basement was just a reinforced storm cellar. But yesterday, while they were away on their anniversary trip, I found the key hidden inside a hollowed out book in my father's study. I didn't find a storm cellar. I found a second version of my own bedroom, perfectly preserved from the year I was born, except for one thing. The photos on the wall weren't of me. They were of a boy who looked exactly like me, but he had a name I've never heard. My life is a lie. My parents are strangers, and I think I'm living the life of a brother I never knew I had. To give you context, my childhood was almost suspiciously perfect. We lived in a house that felt like it belonged in a movie, a massive Victorian on the edge of the suburbs, surrounded by thick woods that my father always warned me never to enter. My parents, David and Elena, were the type of people everyone in town admired. My dad was a high school principal, known for his strict but fair discipline, and my mom ran a local flower shop. They were the golden couple. But there was always one rule that was never to be broken. The steel door at the end of the basement hallway was off limits. I grew up thinking it was normal. Every house has its quirks, right? My dad told me the foundation was shifting and the room behind that door was structurally unsound. He said it was a safety hazard. As a kid, I was terrified of it. I used to imagine monsters lived behind that cold, gray metal. But as I got older, the fear turned into a quiet, nagging curiosity. Why did my mother go down there every Friday night with a fresh tray of food? Why did my father spend hours in his study looking at old blueprints of the house that didn't match the actual layout? The anniversary trip was the first time they had left me alone in the house for more than a night. They were headed to a mountain resort 4 hours away. "Don't go in the basement, Leo," my father had said, his eyes lingering on mine just a second too long before they pulled out of the driveway. That was his mistake. Mentioning it made it the only thing I could think about. The search for the key took me 3 hours. I checked the usual spots, the top of the door frames, under the rugs, the junk drawer. Nothing. It wasn't until I went into my father's study, a room I was rarely allowed in, that I noticed a copy of Great Expectations on the shelf. It looked different than the other books. The spine didn't have any creases. I pulled it out and the weight was wrong. It was a hollow box. Inside sat a heavy brass skeleton key. It felt cold in my hand, heavier than it looked. I walked down to the basement. The air got colder with every step. I reached the steel door. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack one. I slid the key into the lock. It didn't stick. It turned with a smooth, silent click that told me this lock was used often. It was well oiled. It was maintained. I pushed the door open, expecting a dusty cellar or a storage room. Instead, I was hit with the smell of lavender and baby powder. I stepped into a hallway that shouldn't have existed. It was a mirror image of the upstairs hallway, but it was pristine. The carpet was plush and white, not a single footprint on it. The wallpaper was a soft, pale blue, the exact same shade as my nursery when I was a baby. I walked to the end of the hall, toward a door that was slightly ajar. When I pushed it open, I felt my stomach drop into my shoes. It was my bedroom. Not my current bedroom, but the one I had when I was 5 years old. The same race car bed, the same stack of Magic Treehouse books, the same blue curtains. But on the wall, there were framed photos, hundreds of them. In every photo, there was a boy. He looked just like me. He had my messy brown hair, my slightly crooked smile, and the same birthmark on his left temple. But in the photos, he was wearing clothes I never owned. He was at a park I'd never visited. And in every photo, he looked different. There was a sadness in his eyes that I didn't recognize in my own childhood pictures. I walked over to the desk. There was a birth certificate laying there, protected by glass casing. The name on the top wasn't Leo. It was Julian. Julian Thomas Miller, born May 14th, 2006. My birthday, my hospital. Everything was the same, but the footprints on the back, the little ink marks they take when you're a newborn, were totally different from the ones in my own baby book upstairs. I started to realize that I wasn't the first Leo, or rather, I wasn't the original version of myself. I sat on the race car bed, the fabric feeling stiff and unused under my hands. I reached under the pillow, a habit I had as a kid to hide my secret snacks. My hand hit something hard. It was a leather-bound journal. I opened it to the first page. It was my mother's handwriting. October 12th, 2011. Julian is gone. The accident was so fast, so senseless. David says we can't tell anyone. He says the community wouldn't understand. He says he found a way to fix it. He found a boy in the city, a boy who needs a home, a boy who looks just like him. We're going to bring him here. We're going to call him Leo. We're going to start over. It's the only way to stay whole. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I wasn't their son. I was a replacement part, a fix for a tragedy they refused to acknowledge. I turned the pages, my eyes blurring as I read years of entries about how they trained me to respond to Julian's favorite things, how they corrected my behavior when I didn't act enough like the boy who died. They hadn't been raising a son, they had been performing an experiment in grief management. I was still clutching Julian's journal when I heard the heavy sound of the garage door rumbling open. My blood turned to ice. They were home 6 hours early. I scrambled to stand up, my mind racing. I needed to get out of the basement. I needed to lock that steel door and act like I had been upstairs playing Roblox the whole time. But as I reached the hallway, the basement lights flickered on. My father was already standing at the top of the stairs. He didn't scream. He didn't even look angry. He just sighed, a long, weary sound that made my skin crawl. "I told you the foundation was weak, Leo," he said, his voice as calm as if he were discussing the weather. He walked down the stairs, one slow step at a time, followed by my mother. She was carrying a tray of food, steak and mashed potatoes, the same meal she had made for me on my 10th birthday. "Who is Julian?" I screamed, my voice cracking. I held up the journal like a shield. My mother's face didn't break. She just smiled that perfect florist shop smile and set the tray down on Julian's desk. "Julian was just a practice run, sweetheart," she said. "But you are the masterpiece. You are exactly who we needed you to be." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just a replacement. I was a prisoner of their delusion. My father explained it all. He told me how they had scoured orphanages and private adoptions for a child with my exact facial structure. He told me how they spent years subtly gaslighting me into forgetting my early memories, replaced by the stories of Julian's life. Every time I thought I remembered a different house or a different mother, they told me I was just having a bad dream. They had built a life for a dead boy, and they had forced me to live inside his skin. My father stepped closer, reaching out a hand. "We did this for you, Leo. We gave you a family. We gave you a home. All you have to do is give us back the key." I didn't give him the key. I bolted. I pushed past my mother, knocking the tray of food to the floor, and sprinted for the stairs. I didn't stop to grab my phone or my wallet. I ran out the front door into the cold night air and didn't stop running until I reached the main road. I flagged down a passing car and begged them to take me to the police station. And that brings us to now. I'm sitting in the back of a patrol car. The officers are inside the house right now, searching that steel door. I don't know what they'll find. I don't know if Julian is the only one buried in that basement's history. All I know is that the people I called mom and dad for 20 years are currently being handcuffed in the driveway of a house that was never really mine. My name isn't Leo, my life isn't real, and I have no idea who I'm supposed to be tomorrow. But I want to know what you guys think. Would you stay in a perfect life if you found out it was built on a lie? Or would you burn it all down to find the truth? Drop a comment below and let me know, because honestly, I could really use some advice right now. I also want to say a huge thank you for sticking through this 10-minute marathon. We are pushing so hard for 35,000 subscribers, and every single one of you who hits that button helps me keep telling these stories and building this community. You guys are the only real family I have right now. Who wants to play with me? Comment your name, like, and subscribe. I'll be checking the comments and hearting my favorites. I'm VoidVex, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.